Good morning, everybody. I'm in a funky parked position in my vehicle, so I apologize for the light coming through. This is going to be the final video of the 5 videos for Ron Wyatt's discoveries. Save this one for last. Obviously, it's the big discovery. It's the big main course. It's the big groundbreaking thing that he found, and it's also the most controversial thing that he found. There's a lot of conjecture, there's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of doubt with this one, and the video evidence is just not quite there to back it up like it was for the other 4 discoveries. And you'll figure out and understand why when you watch the video what happened. But this one is incredible because the profoundness of what this means, if this is all accurate, is bigger than groundbreaking. It's exponentially important that we talk about these topics because there's not enough situations where there's close enough proof beyond like a spectral or a feeling that most people have, like dreams when they die. You know, this is like concrete stuff that was seen and touched by people. And this one really would drive home. It's exponential. That's all I got to say about it. I really want you to watch the video. This is the discovery of the Ark of the Covenant, where Jesus was crucified at Golgotha. The blood of Christ on the mercy seat. Like, this is a real big deal. So take a look at this one. You're going to have some mixed feelings about it. I did when I saw it the first time, but it really drives home the size of what this is. It really drives home the perplexity of the situation we live in this world, and with Christ as our leader. It really is cataclysmic any way you look at it, having this information. So watch this video. I'll touch base at the end again. We'll talk about it briefly so you guys don't have to listen to my voice and see my face. That's not what this is. I keep saying that, but I need to keep reminding everybody this is just to spread the word. And all I want to do is spread the word. I don't care about anything else. And that's freeing. It's a great feeling to be able to feel that way, to just want to spread the word for the sake of the word. So check this out. Let me know what you think. We'll touch base at the end. Thank you.
Ron Wyatt claimed to find the blood of Jesus Christ. He claimed to find it in Jerusalem in an underground chamber where the garden tomb is, where Golgotha is, on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. I'm going to look at this objectively, and I'm not going to say that he absolutely did find it, but I'm going to show you several reasons that indicate that he was telling the truth. And you need to use discernment. Pray to God over this. Don't just watch it and believe everything. Actually test the spirits and see whether these things are so. Prove all things.
And the earth did quake, and the rocks rent.
But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. And there are 3 that bear witness in earth, the Spirit, and the water, and the blood, and these 3 agree in one. If we receive the witness of men, the witness of God is greater. For this is the witness of God which he hath testified of his Son.
So anyway, I was walking along the cliff face behind this bus station back in this area. I was walking through there. My left hand went out without my brain doing it, and my mouth said, "That's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant's in there." Well, I was dumbfounded. This sort of thing doesn't happen to me. In fact, you know, I resist that sort of thing because people that I consider wackos say they have those kinds of experiences. And I still think that most of them that say they have these experiences are wackos. But sometimes, in other words, I don't feel comfortable with that kind of experience. But our tickets were due the next morning, so we flew home. I told the man, he said, "That's wonderful." He says, "We'll let you dig there. We'll give you all the help you need, a place to stay, provide you food, do your laundry." And this is Israeli. They don't do that. We went home, and I had no idea why the Ark of the Covenant had been there. I'd never even thought about it. You know, my cup was running over already with things that God has shown me. And so, you know, I was not looking for anything else. So I went home, prayed, and asked the Lord to help me understand why the Ark of the Covenant might possibly be in that place. I was impressed to read the history of the conquest of Jerusalem, and in this 2 Kings chapter 25, it says that Nebuchadnezzar built forts against the city round about. That in modern language is a siege wall. Now this meant that nobody could take anything out of the city or bring anything in the city. So the Ark of the Covenant had to be hidden in the city, under the city, or inside the siege wall. All right? Well, we don't know for sure where the Babylonian siege wall was located, but we know where Titus's siege wall was located. All right? Catapults had the same range back in Nebuchadnezzar's time as they did in Titus's time. And they always built these siege walls out of range of the catapults that were defending the city. So we know where it had to have been. And from that siege wall, people could not observe, you know, watchmen walking the wall, the siege wall, couldn't observe somebody bringing something out into that cliff over there. So I thought, okay, that makes it reasonable. We got ready, came back and started digging. January 1979. In January 6, 1982, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I found the Ark of the Covenant. All right, you would not believe the amount of stone and dirt and everything we had moved. The little Arab guy that was letting us eat at his restaurant, he was a full-grown man, but he's about that tall and small, petite. So as we went through this cave system, he would crawl into the chambers, and I'd give him a light, and he'd shine it around, and I'd peek through to see if it looked like anything in there. So we did this over and over, and we came to this one hole after we had, I mean, you wouldn't believe where all we had gone in that cave. And at this point in time, we had gone about 45 feet down and then back up. And here this hole was in the wall, about that big around, and there was a stalactite hanging right down the middle of it. It's the only stalactite I had seen in the cave that wasn't just little ones. This was a big one, and I had it in my collection of things. So I broke it off, made the hole big enough for him to get in, and he was crawling in there, and I started to hand him the light so he could do what we had been doing, you know, several days. He came tearing out of there. His eyes were big as human eyes can get, and he said, "What's in there? What's in there? I'm not going back in there." And I said, "Well, what did you see?" He said, "I didn't see anything." And I thought, well, okay. Now, he had been in tighter places than that and had not responded that way. So I got this little beam of light, you know, in a very dark place here. And I thought, that is divine terror. That's supernatural terror. So I figured that is either where the Ark of the Covenant is, or it's the way to get to it, one or the other. And God doesn't want this fella to know where it is. So anyway, he just said, I must get out here. So off he went. So I made the hole big enough for me to get in. I got in there, and folks, it was full of rocks, bigger than these here, up to within 18 inches or so of the ceiling. If this young man hadn't been terrorized and come scooting out of there like he did, I would not have gone in that place. But who needs rocks? We've been moving thousands of them for 3 years. So anyway, I crawled in there with the flashlight, and I crawled around on top of the rocks, and I shined the light down between the cracks in the rock, and there a flat gold thing reflected back at me. So I moved over and shined down through another. There was 2 reflections, one here, one there, and one over here. So I knew it was a flat gold top. And I thought, the Ark of the Covenant. I forgot about the cherubims, sitting on top. They'd have been poking up through if that was the top of the mercy seat. But anyway, I started moving these rocks, and I stuck them everywhere I could. By the time I got down to that gold surface, I had them behind my shoulders, leaning back against them, and it was the table of showbread. Well, hey, that's not a bad thing, huh? But anyway, I was looking for the Ark of the Covenant, and it was only then that I took time to carefully examine the rest of the chamber. See, I had just crawled in, took a quick look, and started checking down under the rocks. So as I moved the flashlight along the wall, I saw a stone box sitting against the wall about this low, this much space between it and the ceiling. The lid was broke, slid around, and right above it was a crack with dark brown-looking material at the bottom on the bottom of this crack. And I was able to see the top of the lid of the box. On both sides of the broken pieces was more of this brown stuff. All of a sudden, I realized I was sitting in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and that Christ's blood had come down. I had never heard anybody preach anything about that sort of possibility. Never. And it was too much for me. When I regained consciousness and looked at my watch, again, 45 minutes had passed from the time I crawled in the chamber. Because I figured I'd find the Ark of the Covenant in there, I wanted to know what time it was. So anyway, it was 2 o'clock when I entered the chamber. And after I regained consciousness, it was 2:45. I couldn't see down in there, but I knew what it was.
Now, I'm not a body language expert, but this guy seems to be telling the truth. He seems to be recollecting real events by his hand movements and just by the way that he explains things. And I cut a lot of this out as well just to condense it for this video, but again, I'm going to be objective about this. My main point here is that he really does seem to be recalling events as he experienced them. If you were to visit the Garden Tomb today in Israel, you would be able to see the tomb that Jesus Christ rose from. can see the skull, where the Bible describes it as Skull Hill, Golgotha. And you can also see the place where they covered up Ron Wyatt's excavation, the place where Jesus was crucified. And it's pretty hidden, so you have to know where it is. This family here who is visiting the Garden Tomb, fortunately for them, the gardener, he knew where Ron Wyatt's excavation was. And then they met a guy who said some pretty interesting things. He was putting the puzzle pieces together and connecting the dots. So have a listen to what he has to say as well.
Yeah, our prayer that we pray in the Lord's Prayer, as in heaven, so on earth, this was God's desire, because He knew that we were slaves to sin. We were slaves to the slave owner at the time, and the slave owner had been, ownership had been given over to the devil. Well, when He actually was crucified, it was the innocent Lamb, the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. Well, it says that He took His blood into the heavenly holy of holies, but also as in earth, because it says there's three witnesses in the earth. The blood, the water, and the Spirit. So the blood and the water came out of the side of Jesus. At the time of the crucifixion, there was a great earthquake, and the rocks were rent. And of course, you can see, if you go back there, you can see where they filled it in. But I can't, I saw before it got filled in, and they literally filled in the cracks that came down through here.
So you yourself saw?
I saw it before they filled it in, and you can see it on the other side where they did fill it in. But the crack comes down here, and the crack came down, and it was right at the base of the cross. And so then after Jesus had died, Spirit, out came blood and water, poured down, and it dropped onto the mercy seat.
Right, exactly. So then, you've been to Zedekiah's tunnel or caves or whatever, and in there and everything?
I know essentially
where it is,
how to get in.
So that's two things we wanted to do today was come here and see this, and go to his tunnel and kind of just see. We don't want to obviously try to find it, but because you actually saw Ron Wyatt and met him.
Yeah.
What was your name?
Robert. It was 30 years ago.
Really? Wow.
And so I was just sitting across the table. I was a proud young kid, and I talked to him for a while, and then I realized how stupid I am, because when you're in the presence of somebody who's humble, and then your pride gets really shown for what it is, and so that was pretty.
So so it's underneath us.
This is the Ark of the Covenant, and why people don't understand it. I guess they don't understand the covenant. They don't understand the blood. They don't understand what God was doing.
Right.
The reason we have the freedom and the Spirit that we have is because the blood's down on
the ark. It was supposed to
the
anoint the
water
ark. I know.
there, and that's what made it so that we can have the Spirit, because it's holy. I heard that they sent 6 people in to try to pull that out of there.
Yeah, and they died.
Right. Do you know why?
They weren't alled to be in there yet. Papa said no.
But do you know why?
Well, then there more.
They would profane the ark.
Yeah.
Well, what's profaning the ark? Well, what's on the ark? What's on there? The blood is. What's the blood doing? It's speaking a better thing than that of
Right.
Abel. And the thing is, it's the throne of God in the earth, as in heaven, so on earth. We got something rocking. I mean, I say rocking, but we got something going on here. This is, to understand, that won't be messed with until that which restrains him is taken away.
Exactly.
And when that happens, we're talking, we're going to have hell revealed on this earth, and that's the great tribulation.
Important witness that is going to be an important witness.
Right.
That blood on the ark, so that has to be preserved until the time's right.
Must be.
Yeah, and then when the abomination of desolation is when the man of sin sits on the throne and proclaims himself God.
Right.
Elohim.
So whatever he does to profane, because that's what the devil's always trying to get into the midst of something to profane it.
I'm so thankful to run into you guys.
Yeah.
This to have confirmation from someone else. We try to tell our friends this, and they just don't. They just don't want to believe it because it's too crazy.
Deal.
So if you're wondering why they're so interested in Zedekiah's cave, it's because Ron Wyatt found the entrance. There's an actual tunnel that'll take you right to the Ark of the Covenant chamber, and it's sealed off right now because Israel sealed it off.
And then you can also see a wall that Ron Wyatt is standing in here, and let's take a closer look at this wall.
So I'm going to read from a book that was recently published with all of Ron Wyatt's discoveries, and apparently on this gold detector test that they did at the Garden Tomb. In 2016, 36 tests were done using a directional metal detector in order to confirm the Ark of the Covenant. Prior to conducting these tests, the detector was tested to see if it could detect a gold coin about 15 feet away, and next to try and detect an 8-inch 18-karat gold chain about 10 feet away. In both cases, the detector pointed to these objects without failure. Over the course of several days, the detector was used in front of the cutouts in the rock of the crucifixion site of Christ that we had mentioned earlier. Below this area should be the Ark of the Covenant. But could a detector pick up a reading for gold and the Ark at a depth of 50 feet? Tests were done in front of the rock escarpment about 20 feet away, then at 45-degree angles, then over to each side. In every test result, the detector pointed to the correct location of the Ark. After receiving these readings, the detector was positioned over the spot that should be the center of where the detector had been pointing. When placed over this spot, the detector began to spin, meaning the gold is directly below. This was still another confirmation. When moved away from this spot several feet, it would point back to where the Ark should be. It repeated this time after time without failure. The idea then came that the detector should get a real workout. How about trying it from 65 and 100 feet, respectively, from 3 different directions? Could the detector still find the Ark? First, it was positioned at the overlook for Skull Hill, that is a raised platform at about 100 feet from where the Ark should be. Amazingly, it once again pointed to the Ark. Next, it was positioned 65 feet directly out from the rock face, and once again it pointed to the Ark. Finally, it was positioned 100 feet toward the entrance to the Garden Tomb grounds, and once again it pointed to the Ark. In order to get these long-distance test results, there would have to be a large amount of gold in that location. All in all, there were 36 test results. Every test that was done with the detector confirmed there was gold in the direction of the Ark as reported by the late Ron Wyatt. There were no tests that contradicted this site. End quote. So you can see it starting to spin because the guy is going over that spot again. And whenever this guy goes over that spot, it spins, and whenever he's not at that spot, it points back to that spot. Now, I have to admit, this was one of the most difficult things to research out of all the stuff that I've looked into when it comes to Ron White, because these metal detectors, or as they're more properly known as frequency detectors, have a lot of fake scam versions floating around on the internet. And it was very difficult to determine if this is actually something that could possibly be real at all. And once I asked my wife, she looked into it, she actually found out that these things can be real. It's just really rare because people are not looking for giant amounts of gold like this thing would find. If you're going to find a random piece of gold underground, you're not gonna, like, where are you going to look? This thing is not going to work very well for finding a little piece of gold that's buried into the ground like most people are going to randomly find, if they find anything at all. I mean, the device itself, these devices cost a lot of money, the real ones. And if you spend that much money and you actually end up finding something as well, like, those two things might be kind of hard to put together because of just the statistical likelihood of you just walking around and finding a gold watch buried into the ground or something is just so rare that the reports of success are just nowhere to be found. So anyways, that's how the market kind of works for this item, but there are real ones, as you can see in this video. This is the video that my wife found from a channel where the guy can actually build the thing himself, it seems. He demonstrates how the detector will always point back to the gold coins, and then it'll start spinning once it's above it, just like in the Ark of the Covenant video. Notice how when he pulls the device back away from the coins, it stops spinning and it starts pointing. But when he gets closer to the coins, it starts to spin again because it's right over the top of the coins. It's right over the top of the gold. So it's not the same model, but it's the same system. It's the same type of thing. You can look as much as you want, you'll never be able to find that model that they use for the Ark of the Covenant online because it's not even sold online. Because the people who are actually using these things, they don't go on the internet to buy them. They buy them in person where it can actually be demonstrated that they work. This whole time it was spinning was right over the top of the coins that he planted there. This shows that this type of device is real and it does work. And I do believe this is a very strong confirmation that there is a massive amount of gold below the site where Ron White claimed the Ark of the Covenant to be. Now, there's more. I'm going to read a personal testimony by a guy named Ian Fain, who is an eyewitness to a video shot in the cave taken by Ron himself. So let me just start reading. This is, by the way, from an email correspondence that he had made with arkdiscovery.com. This may be an appropriate time to mention publicly that I and several other Christians have watched with our own eyes a video which Ron shot inside the cave before the furniture was rearranged. The crack in the roof was clearly visible with the blood still on it. The table was there in close-up, and many piles of skins. The Ark was there, but was covered by a brilliant white light, which hid it from the camera as Ron panned around the cave. To the best of my knowledge, there is only one copy of it in existence, Ron's original, and it's not in America now. It's in a safe place of the Lord's own choosing, to which I once took Aaron Sen, who has met the keeper but has not viewed the tape. I was an eyewitness of Ron's tape of the inside of the cave. I wasn't with him when he shot it, but I saw the tape not very long afterwards. Ron himself was keen that the tape should be seen widely. Events turned out otherwise, however. But for what it's worth, I'm happy to answer any questions I can about the tape and what I saw on it. I last viewed it some years ago and my visual memory is not great. I'm far better with words. However, by the same token, my visual imagination is pretty bad too, which is probably a good thing for this purpose. My sole purpose in mentioning it here was to help strengthen the faith of some here whose confidence in Ron's word may have been shaken by doubts. How long is the videotape? The section shot inside the cave was part of a longer tape, most of which contained other less dramatic stuff. I'd say there were several minutes of material shot inside the cave. What quality is it? Shaky, steady, on a tripod, in color? Steady and in color. From what I can recall, I'd say it was almost certainly shot using a tripod and a single camera light, which Ron moved about in between shots from one part of the cave to another so as to get pictures of the contents from different angles. What type of lighting used? Good quality or poor? Grainy footage or clear? Single light fixed to the camera. As Ron panned around the cave, the light moved with the camera. Off-center, the edges of the frame were quite dark. The tape was free from grain, but the color balance was not great. I suppose it was NTSC, which in the days when I was a videotape engineer, we used to say stood for never the same color twice. Did you see any angels on the tape? No. Was there a timestamp on the tape itself that was displayed on the screen? Not that I recall, there wasn't. How long ago did you see it? Pass. That information might assist those who want to find the tape. Have you ever talked to Ron about the tape? If so, what did he say? I never talked to him specifically about the tape. I did ask him questions about the Ark, about the tables of stone, and about the Book of the Law. I assumed at the time that everybody who knew anything of Ron's work had seen this tape along with all his other material. It was only when Bill Fry intercepted a post of mine to this list that I realized that this was not so. Even Bill hadn't seen it. The persons who have the tape, are they waiting for the right time to release it? Did Ron give it to him, her, them, or what's the reason for them holding it back? Same answer as to the previous question, I'm afraid. Sorry. From your perspective, is this the tape where Ron took out the tables of stone? Was this before or after the event if it's not the same footage? No, it's an earlier tape. Neither Ron nor the tables appeared on the tape I saw. How many people were with you when you viewed it, and where did this occur? Australia? Only one person viewed it simultaneously with me, but several others had seen it just a few days previously. One has since gone to be with the Lord, but the others are still alive. The country name is under wraps, as per Q5. Does Ron say anything on the tape? If so, what does he say? No, Ron was the cameraman, but he didn't appear in front of the camera, and I don't recall his giving any verbal commentary on the sequence inside the cave. What does the table of showbread look like? To be honest, it looked dark bronze, but I suppose that was the effect of the camera light, which probably had a predominantly blue spectrum. The table was rectangular and had a raised decorative border a few inches high running all around the top, which what I took to be cast pomegranates at regular intervals. The cave sequence opened with a close-up shot of one corner of the table, showing some fine workmanship in its making. Did you see the 7-branch candlestick, and if so, what did it look like? No, I was consciously looking for it, but I didn't see it. Everybody asked this question. It's the most popular question after the Ark itself. You said you saw the skins piled up in a corner? They weren't piled in a corner. They were heaped everywhere, all over the floor and everything else, lots of them. What conditions were they in? I don't recall any close-ups of the coverings, but the general impression was one of gray dustiness. They were folded up as you would fold a lot of blankets, and some were obviously covering large objects underneath. The menorah may have been on its side under them. Did you see any other object in the cave, and if so, what were they? At the time, I thought this tape was going on general release, and that I'd be getting a copy sometime, so I didn't make any mental notes. But I do remember seeing the stone box in which the Ark had been stored, with its lid moved to one side. I have a feeling that Goliath's sword was there, but I have no particular mental image of it. Just that we discussed it between ourselves, and the reason for our discussing it was probably that it was in there. Of course, the dominant feature was the Ark itself, and the fact that it was hidden by a brilliant white light. As Ron panned the camera around, a circle of light moved across the field of view until it filled the whole screen, then it moved off again at the other edge. Ron's verbal account of this was that the effect was only on the tape. No such light was visible to him inside the cave when he saw the Ark plainly. It was only when he viewed the tape afterwards that he saw the light had covered the Ark for the purpose of the recording. The other notable feature was the crack in the roof of the cave with the dark stain of blood on one side of it, about the size of one's hand, I should think. The roof was not high. A man would probably have had to stoop to avoid hitting his head. Seeing the blood there was the most moving thing to me. I think if the Lord had wanted somebody to give a detailed account of the tape, he would have chosen somebody other than me to see it. My powers of visual observation and retention are famously bad. My principal contribution to this debate is simply that I can testify to having seen that tape, that it showed exactly what Ron said it did, and that I was awed at what I saw. I think we all were. Did the table of showbread have just one shelf, top one, or any below it too? I only remember seeing the top surface, and not much below it. I think it was perhaps partially covered by skins, but it was quite a while ago, and as I mentioned earlier, my visual memory is really terrible. How close to the ceiling was the Ark of the Covenant stone case? Very close. I remember being rather surprised at how low the roof was. I can't give you any meaningful estimate of the exact distance. I'd have to view the tape again to do that, but my memory is that it was about enough to crawl into and not much more. Was the chamber cleared out? Like, was Ron shooting the video from the floor of the chamber, or was he standing on stones, or what? You said he was close to the ceiling. Any thoughts on how close? The chamber was certainly not cleared out. In fact, apart from things like the lid of the stone box, it looked as though nobody had been in there for centuries, as I suppose they hadn't. The place looked like a lumber room, with things everywhere all over the floor, and of course all those heaps of skins, so that you would have to clamber over one thing to look at the next. Ron was about my height, 6 foot, and I'd reckon I'd have to stoop in there, but I think the camera was a foot or more so below head height. Was the stone case that held the Ark in the middle of the chamber, or up against one of the sides? From the opening shot, it was on the right-hand side at the back. If the camera was central, that is, but what with there being so many objects in there, only those in front of the camera being illuminated, and the light in front of the Ark disorienting things a bit, I couldn't swear to it. However, my memory is certainly that it wasn't in the center of the cave. I think it was close to a wall at the back. Did you see any openings into the chamber or the shape of the chamber? No, because of the limited lighting, that wasn't possible. Did it look like a high 8 video or something older? Actually, it didn't look too bad, all things considered. It was a difficult situation for an amateur shoot. I was never into amateur video. I worked with B&W 1-inch tape and 12-inch reels, so I couldn't guess which system it was. The picture quality seemed rather better than some of Ron's other stuff though, so maybe he had taken particular care to get a hold of a good camera. Does the keeper of the video still have the tape? I guess he certainly could, but amazing as it sounds to us here, he has forgotten the cave sequence completely. As Aaron Sen and I discovered when we called upon him for the express purpose of having a look at it, in Aaron's case for the first time. Now in the context of our uneventful little lives, that sounds hard to believe. That anybody to whom these things mean so much could actually forget such a unique thing in his possession. This man is a spirit-filled believer in the Lord, and is deeply appreciative of the significance of these matters. He supported Ron, and contributed significantly to Ron's work, so he isn't ignorant, but he is a man to whom strange and sometimes dangerous things just happen. The same was true of his father, so it runs in the family. I have said sometimes that if and when World War III breaks out, it will be 6 feet away from where this man happens to be standing at that moment. A bit like being the guy who happened to be standing next to Crown Prince Ferdinand when he was shot in 1914. This man has about a dozen of Ron's tapes, but he has not sat down and cataloged them, and to do so would necessarily take up a fair bit of time. His wife, too, is the CEO of a multi-million-dollar business. I hope I have given you something of the picture. People like this do not sit around in the evenings flicking through the TV channels. They live very full, and sometimes dangerous lives. But for all that, it would be hard to think of a more suitable man to be keeper of something like this. He is completely fearless, and he is very well aware of what is going on in the world behind the scenes. His friends and contacts are too.
Christ died and the earth shook and the rocks were rent, a crack came right down the entire face of the escarpment, right past the left side of the cross hole, and the stone opened up. Down below, 20 feet below, God had arranged for the Ark of the Covenant with its mercy seat, if you please, his earthly throne, to be positioned right down there 600 years before, in 586 BC, when the Babylonian army destroyed the city. When the centurion stuck his spear in Christ's spleen and probably left ventricle to make sure he was dead before he gave the body to Joseph of Arimathea, when he pulled that spear out, the separated platelets and serum of the blood of the Son of God gushed out, went down through that crack onto the mercy seat. And that ratified the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. The fourth trip I made into this chamber, it was spotless. The furnishings were set in perfect order. The Ark of the Covenant, however, had been placed against the wall, the end of the cave. The end of the cave was a beautiful crystal radiating the colors of the rainbow. Now, I know New Age and all that goes in for rainbows, so do homosexuals and all of that. But God used it first, all right? It's around his throne, and it's around his earthly throne. Now, there's no veil in this setup, so it is the earthly, it's God's temple on earth, or his residence where he once dwelt. And anyway, when I found it like this, there were 4 young men standing in there. And I started to say, you know, what are you doing here? And I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything. One of the people said, we are the 4 angels that have been taking care of the ark since Moses put the tables of stone in it, right? And they instructed me to set up my video camera with the tripod, aim it at the Ark of the Covenant, and they went over, lifted the mercy seat up. I don't know how heavy it is. I've never tried to lift it, but it's solid gold. And the angel said, take the tables of stone out of there. God wants everyone to see those. I took them out. All right. They put the mercy seat back down over the Ark of the Covenant. I backed away a little bit. The angel came, got the tables of stone, put them on a rock ledge inside the chamber, and I was then instructed to take a sample of the blood from the mercy seat, have that analyzed, and I did everything the angel told me to do.
My question is that you said that you had the blood of our Lord examined by the Israelis.
That's correct.
What was their determination of that?
Okay, real quickly, okay. Dried blood is dead blood. Everybody knows that, all right? They can test the blood of the pharaohs, the mummies of the pharaohs, all right? There's certain things they can do. They cannot get a chromosome count by any method I'm familiar with, all right? Things keep changing. I don't profess to know everything. However, there's no way I know that you can get a chromosome count out of dead blood. You can get a DNA and some other things, but not a chromosome count, all right? That's done by living white blood cells. Now then, first of all, in this analysis, I took the blood into a laboratory in Israel. I asked one of the people I work with in antiquities, where is a good laboratory that does reliable work? And they said, such and such, such and such. I took it. I just said, please examine this blood and tell me what you can tell me about it. All right? They said, well, look, we're going to reconstitute it. We're going to put it in normal saline and keep it at body temperature for 72 hours with gentle swirling. All right, that's their business. That's great. I said, now I want to be there when you check it out. They said, fine. So I was back. They checked it out. I said, now, they said it's human blood. We can tell that. They did whatever tests they need to do. And then I said, take some of the white blood cells and put them in a growth medium and keep them at body temperature for 48 hours. And they said, well, that'll do no good because it's dead blood. I said, would you please do that for me? And they said, okay, we'll do it. So anyway, I said, I want to be there when you take it out and examine it. So I was back there. They took it out, examined it under a microscope, and the one technician called the other one over there, and then they called the boss over there, and they were talking Hebrew a mile a minute there for a little bit, and they looked at me and they said, Mr. Wyatt, this human blood only has 24 chromosomes in it. Everybody else has 46. You see, 23 from your mother, 23 from your father, 22 autosomes from your mother, 22 autosomes from your father. You get an X from your mother, you may get an X or a Y from your father, all right? This blood had 23 chromosomes from the mother's side, one Y chromosome only. You see, the child could not have developed if they hadn't had the autosomes from the mother. So all of his physical characteristics were determined by his mother's side of the family, her autosomes. His maleness was determined by this one Y that came from a source not a human male. Then they said, this blood is alive. And then they said, whose blood is this? I said, it's the blood of your Messiah. And I assure you, those men's lives have changed. In God's appointed time, you will be able to see the proof for yourself.
Now, a lot of people who see this will, out of emotion, say, yes, he has to be telling the truth. And I do think he is telling the truth. But to be objective about this, something that's really interesting is that he was bold enough to say this in front of a geneticist. Someone who actually knows how this stuff works. This is Dr. Eugene Dunkley, a geneticist from England, and this is in 1999, that he says, I do remember that Ron was reluctant to say anything about the finding, but he felt moved during his talk at our church, having met with me earlier, to say what he had found. He knew that I would have some knowledge of the field, and if in fact he thought it was dodgy, he would not have said anything because he knew that I would be one of the few people able to pick it apart. He said in his sermon, knowing that I would understand it, and I feel to this day that God moved on him to do so, that the finding would be spoken of and would stand the test. This convinces me that Ron is right. This geneticist, after hearing Ron go through those details, and those details, that process of gentle swirling and reconstituting the blood or whatever he said, who's going to make that up and fool a geneticist? Now, what's also interesting, and then this is pretty much one of the last things I'm going to talk about in regards to Ron Wyatt, and then we're going to get back into the Bible. Two people who knew Ron Wyatt, they figured out the lab where he got this tested at. And they went to that lab with a letter from that geneticist asking to see these tests. Let me read this to you. My understanding hopefully will not add to the confusion, as Bill Fry and I did follow up at what we believed was the testing facility in Jerusalem around 2003. There was a particular gentleman in Jerusalem that we knew worked with Wyatt. We will not divulge his name as we do not want 10K people calling on him, that provided him with information regarding a testing facility. We had come to Jerusalem with a letter from a Dr. Eugene Dunkley, who was as well interested in reviewing the test results. At the facility, which shall also remain anonymous for the same reasons, we were confronted with an eerie silence. Bill and I both noticed, from the nonverbal communication that no one dared to speak to us concerning the supposed testing. You know how when you confront your kids about something they've done, and they give you that look, guilty as charged, with not a word spoken? We knew, someone there knew something, but nobody dared say a word. These two people who worked with Ron Wyatt closely, with a letter from the geneticist, went to this lab in Israel asking about this blood test, and they got awkward silence. Like, these people knew what they were talking about, but they weren't allowed to say anything. There's just a whole bunch of things that kind of add to the conclusion that he was probably telling the truth. I believe he was telling the truth for the most part. There's one thing that Ron Wyatt said inconsistently, and this is the one part of him where I do not believe he was being honest 100%. Because if you go through his speeches and where he went to different churches and gave his talks, his story was always consistent. And that's the one thing about liars, you can figure out if they're lying because their story always changes. Well, his story always stayed the same, except one particular detail. And that was, he claimed that the angels, one of the angels, when they were talking to him in the fourth visit when he went, said that all of this would be revealed when the mark of the beast laws are enforced. Well, that's what he would say if you were not a Seventh-day Adventist church. If you were a Seventh-day Adventist church, he would say when the Sunday laws are enforced. Now, I had to really dig into this and find out what the angel actually said, or what he claimed the angel actually said. And on his deathbed, he was talking to a Seventh-day Adventist, and he said on his deathbed, the angel specifically said the Sunday law. Now, this is one part of Ron's testimony that I believe he was being dishonest about, because his story kept changing. If the angel told him it was the Sunday law, then why would he basically change the word of God from that point to make it fit the mark of the beast law for other people in other churches? Because what he would say to people is that you're not ready to hear about that yet. You're not ready for that information yet. He would say that to people who are not Seventh-day Adventists. I believe his doctrine got in the way of his honesty. And I'm not sure if the angel said something about the mark of the beast. I'm not sure if he said anything about that at all, but whatever it was, Ron Wyatt was not being 100% honest, because he always changed this particular detail. And this was the only detail that he changed. And again, nobody's perfect. Even what I'm telling you right now, like, I could be wrong myself. But I know for a fact that Ron Wyatt would always change this particular detail, and I hold that against him, because if the angel told you something specific, and you tell people one thing based on what they want to hear, and then somebody else based on what they want to hear, pandering like a politician, because it's your denomination, you can say it now. That's just not how it works. If God tells you something, you need to say exactly how it is. And he did not do that with this particular detail. Now, everything else in his stories always matched.
There it is. I mean, take it as you will. These people have dedicated their lives to this. They've faced extreme ridicule, humiliation, kicked out of the scientific communities, laughing stocks, their credibility as a scientist and archaeologist, everything cast to the ground. They've sacrificed their entire livelihoods to bring this information to people with no gain to themselves. Why would you go through all of this if it was not true? Why would you get so emotionally invested? You wreck your entire career, your lifelong career, to bring this information forward. Who would sacrifice all of that for a lie? And that's what gets me. There's so much depth, there's so much evidence, there's so much factual gathered information. These men believe this to their core. They're not just fools, they're not just happenstancers. These people are learned, they're educated, they spent their lives dedicating themselves to things, to go out and find this, to uncover this, and then put up everything they've done on a gamble to show the world. And the world decided, nah, we're gonna shove this under the rug because it does not fit our narrative. And we don't want anybody to know about it. We're going to destroy you and anybody else who tried to get in contact. I mean, if so many people are going through so much to make sure this information doesn't get out, I want to hear the information. Wouldn't you? If it's not harmful to anybody and it's just, hey, we found something that proves the Bible, and like an entire government goes after you to shut you down, like, I want to know that information. What's got the government so scared? What's got the people scared? Then you deep dive into all this and you realize, oh, the worldly view, the concept by which everyone functions that isn't the follower of Yahushua, Jesus, they don't want you to know any of this stuff because it makes you stronger as a believer, and they don't want you stronger. They don't want you believing because you're so much easier to control if you're part of the wicked system. There's so much I can't wait to put up. This is ending the 5-video intro segment I wanted to do. And what's coming next is going to be a whole world of crazy. Some of this stuff almost lost me when I started. There's a whole lot of stuff I looked into that I'm never even going to talk about because I can't even corroborate any of it. It's just too far out there. But the stuff I'm bringing to this channel is stuff that you can look up, stuff that can be verified, and stuff that's just too coincidental to not be something there. So I hope you enjoyed these videos. I hope they spoke to you in ways they spoke to me. If you want to dive deeper into anything else, let me know. I've got tons of stuff for you to look into to move you down that rabbit hole. But thanks for joining me on this one. Thanks for being a part of this. Thanks for watching these videos. Some of this stuff changed my views entirely, and I hope they did the same for you. We'll catch you on the next one. Things are going to start getting real weird, you know, as best they can be. Peace out.